Thank you. Wonderful. Well, it's a pleasure being here with you all and share some of the work that my colleagues, my team, and I have been doing for the past few years. As Olina also mentioned, we do indeed use AI throughout the test development process and test administration and scoring. So we are quite involved in figuring out what is the best way to take advantage of these technologies as at the same time protecting the quality of the test and the integrity of the scores. So I will walk you through some of our both a bit of history of the past few years, but also our philosophy and how we approach things. Think about that we started working on the use of AI for complex items well ahead of ChatGPT being announced. And therefore, a lot of the things that we did have been truly developed by us and trying to learn what works best. So there is a bit of that pioneering mindset in a lot of the work that I will present today. Give me 1 second to, all right. So let's talk a bit about the role of AI in language assessment. Again, the question for us are how to maintain the validity of a learning and assessment system, and how can we make sure that we incorporate human values, fairness, inclusion, professional integrity, transparency, accountability in this process. Now, human-centered AI represents a framework for placing human values at the center of the development, and application of AI systems in any domain, acknowledging the power, but also the risk of AI. And from our perspective, my colleague Jill Burstein and I came up with a framework, a proposal to develop a conceptual structure for discussing the development of AI-based learning and assessment system that incorporate these values. And we have a paper, it's a book chapter in this book that just came out. We are also trying to make it open source, so we are in the process of doing that. Some reason this is so what is the framework that we are presenting, and the way we think about is if you look on the right side of the screen, is to think of the validity of the test or a learning system the traditional way, to also look at responsible AI standards and what those may mean and what are the recommendations for those. But last but not least is the human in the loop practices, and identify where these three things meet, and that's the place that we obtain, we are much more confident that we will have a human-centered AI application in assessment. And whenever we talk about human-centered AI, we do need to go and talk about all of these three elements with the understanding that the validity is what is the best known in our community, assessment scientists, assessment practitioners, while the other two are often more familiar to our colleagues from other communities like computer science and ethics in computer science. Perhaps I should also mention that our R&D unit is a very interdisciplinary unit. We have assessment scientists, we have language specialists, we have psychometricians, and then we also have at least the same amount of number of people, if not more, engineers and AI scientists and AI engineers. So we are definitely a very tech-heavy R&D unit, and this also facilitated some of the developments that we did and the speed at which we did these developments. So the idea here is that we want to expand the traditional concepts of validity and reliability through intelligent automation and computation, but doing so in ways that provide guidance on different uses of AI, and to emphasize ethical and professional responsibilities in this process, because we need to maintain trust with learners, with test takers, and with institutions. So what problems are we trying to solve with AI in assessment? And the focus today is on item generation. But from our perspective, think about who we are. We are the Duolingo English test, a very young test that is trying to, establish itself and build a trust with everybody. So what do we need as a tech-based new test? Well, we have an adaptive test and we deliver the test from home. So one of the highest risks for this test has been test security. So one aspect of test security, we have others and we work on those as well, but we won't talk about those today, is how to build a very, very large item bank and actually to continue replenish it so that we can support a valid and secure digital first assessment that is administered on demand and at scale. So millions of test takers taking the test, even at this moment while we are speaking. So we came to AI not because we were just, oh, here is a shiny new toy. No, we came to it because we had a problem for which we were looking for a good solution. And that's why we started using AI before it was fancy and everybody was talking about, before GPT was announced. We actually started with BERT at that time, which is the precursor of GPT, of large language models. So the way we approach this now, of course, it was not like that at the beginning. It was a lot of trial and error when we started. But the way we think about it now is human-centered AI in test development is developed into what we call the item factory. And the item factory is an interesting concept because it has both some theoretical aspects to it, but it also is very practical. And we have this running nowadays. It's well established and it's smooth, and we still, of course, refine it because that's what we always do, but it is in work, in operations, and has been for about 2 years. So it's the blueprint for the item factory is that it is a human in the loop system that includes several separate but very well integrated sets of activities, processes, and technologies. We have the digital first assessment design. That's the must, how you design items. And here is, of course, where humans lead. Actually, only humans do design the items. In order to think about the content and the content representation, the claim that we want to make, and so on. So traditional test development activities. Then we also need to generate this content at scale, which I mentioned before. That was our main problem we wanted to solve. And we also wanted to generate content that is very complex at scale. What we mean by that are interactive tasks, things that are very hard for humans to do, especially if you ask them to do thousands and thousands of them. We also wanted to figure out how to do content review at scale. And therefore, we need also quite a lot of humans, experts, that can work in this item factory. So we also need features of the human management in this process. Then, of course, we need content management, and we develop what is called an item microservice. I probably won't get into details about that today, that keeps track of the journey of each item. And then we develop a quality control system. We call it analytics for quality assurance for item pools. We have another one already in place. That was the first one that we built. It was analytics for quality assurance for assessment. So we build quality control systems because we believe that is irrelevant who develops the items if the items meet the standards. And from that perspective, quality control tools are more important than how we got there, as long as, of course, we keep in mind the design and the ethics and all of the other elements. So this item factory definitely represents intelligent automation for test development. It combines, as I mentioned before, theoretical assessment frameworks, but also automatic tools, AI, engineering principles to accelerate the item production while maintaining quality. We used for this particular project, we use what we call system thinking. Well, not only we, that it is called system thinking. We try to identify which are the human touch point in this system. What's the journey of an item? From the idea to operation. We want to support human experts with tools so that we improve the efficiency, but without sacrificing the quality. And as I mentioned before, very strict quality control that run underneath everything in a continuous mode in the same way as our test is delivered. So as I said, it's on demand all over the world. So therefore, our quality control has to work underneath everything and monitor what's happening everywhere. Now, as we all know, and Alina already referred to some of this, it's not easy to write good items, not at all. There is some science to it, of course, but there is also a bit of art to it. We want human writers, item writers, to be creative, but not too creative. Also, items in high-stakes tests have to be comparable. So have to have the same they have to follow templates. Humans have to follow templates. It's not that you have a human touch that is allowed in this item, but not that item. That's just not possible. It's kind of boring, actually. After you design the items, you have to be quite strict with following those templates and item specifications. Of course, the human experts have to have knowledge of accurate language. And according to Alina and others, there are at least 43 rules for item writing. It's a hard job. It's a very, very hard job. So it's challenging for both individual item writing and item development, especially for adaptive tests that do require a very large item bank. So if you need to apply these 43 rules for thousands and thousands of complex items, that's extremely hard to do. So this is a very simplistic way to show a bit these item factory processes, although there could be other ways in which we could represent many of these things, because we also have, arrows coming back to different places. So it's a bit more complex in reality. But let's use this to walk through. As I mentioned before, task design is led by the human experts. The assessment scientists evaluate the construct, look at the literature review in what's the best way to measure a particular skill or sub-skill. And they think very carefully of the purpose of the test as well. In our case, we want to take advantage of the fact that the test is digital first, meaning it has been developed from the beginning to be online. And therefore, we want to take advantages of the technologies in this environment, such as this interactivity. So we want to be able to develop items, not necessarily all of them, but some items that are also attempting to measure digitally mediated constructs, such as this interactivity with the system, which, as you all see even right now, we are using Zoom to interact with each other. We are using a chat box to ask questions and so on. So this is part of our philosophy and about who we are. We actually wrote a paper about this. It's on our website. If any of you is interested, it's about the ecosystem that we have in our mind about the Duolingo English test and learning in general. Then we have the generation of those items that were designed by the humans. And here is where we need help from AI to scale that up. Then we have the quality review. I mentioned that before. It's probably the most important part in the process. And we have human experts. We have machine-based filters, but we also have actually human experts reviewing each item. And then we have fairness and bias review as well, because we are a test that delivers throughout the world, and therefore we want to make sure that we are not too US-centric in our content. And then we have piloting and launching, where we collect data first through different smaller pilots, and eventually that's where the various arrows can go back, because we can go back to task design if something doesn't look good in the piloting phase, and then we launch. So we will go through each of this to talk a bit about how that works in this item factory. I mentioned before our paper on the ecosystem. So if you are interested, it's quite, probably it's a bit more complex, the way we think about assessment, the way we think about the responsible AI standards here on the left, because I mentioned before, we actually use AI throughout the process. For us at Duolingo, the expected social impact is the driver, is why we do all of this. We want to provide more access to people throughout the world, and therefore we are thinking, okay, how can we do that? Well, we could do that if we could deliver the test at home. We could do that if the test is digital. We can do that if the test is secure. Well, in order to get all of this, we need a large item bank and a few other features of an assessment. Another thing that we value significantly and in an explicit way is the test taker experience. We call it the TTX. It's relevant for us because we think that the experience that test takers should have in an online assessment should resemble the experiences they have in with other technologies. We all want smooth, we have very high expectations from all of our apps, from banking to, whatever. So we want the same type of frictionless experiences for test takers. And we want to reduce the stress, and we bring in recently, well, about a year and a half ago, we brought in some of the characters from the Duolingo app onto the test. So we want to make it a smoother experience for test takers. Let me just give you an example of one task. This is the latest one. Every year we launched a new task that is interactive. And this is the 2024 interactive writing task. It's a digital first AI powered task. What do we mean by that? So first we aim to expand the writing construct. That's why we did it in the first place. We wanted people to write longer, but not just by giving them more time. The way we wanted is, as I mentioned before, we are interested in this digitally mediated constructs. So we develop an item that provides in the middle of the writing, if you want, provides some feedback to test takers in real time and encourages them to write more about a different aspect of the prompt. This adds interactivity, very lowers the risk of LLMs, as you know. We are always keeping an eye on that. And because it's quite constrained, it's a constrained application, and it increases the length of the responses. So these items will simulate, if you want, an authentic task in any academic environment, where nowadays we all use Google Docs or even in a Word document, and a peer or a professor would read and say, good, this is okay, write more about this. And here is a bit how it looks, though the content don't necessarily spend too much time on the item itself. It's not a real item. But the idea is we first ask them to write about a particular topic for 5 minutes. And then here is this two, where on the right side, this is where AI would come in, look at quickly what the person wrote, look at the prompt, look at the themes. So for us, the data includes the prompt, the themes, and so on. And then AI is looking at that and then says, well, now write about something that it was on the theme, but the test taker didn't address. Now, obviously, we have two parts here. We have the item development with the potential themes or subtopics that are generated individually for each prompt using LLMs. Also, they are associated with the follow-up prompts. So in other words, we design a prompt, then we have, no, sorry, we design the whole thing. Then LLM is asked to design a prompt, but also to design the themes and subtopics, and then to generate follow-up prompts for each of those. So as you can see, it's a very constrained application of AI. We don't let it wild because we know that there could be surprises, and we can't do that to our test takers. So now is the administration part. Test takers would respond to initial prompt. The machine learning model analyzes the responses, identifies which of the predetermined themes are already present, and a theme that is not present in their responses is then selected and administered. Here are examples of prompts and follow-ups. So this is an initial prompt about schools. The theme there is student engagement, and the potential follow-up prompt is, how do you think that students' engagement in schoolwork could be affected by going outside the classroom to learn? So this is an example of structure that we use to generate each piece within this. Now, as I mentioned before, we'll start really generating this at scale. And here is how we do that. So we have the assessment experts that define the target properties of the content, the domain, the subject, stylistic markers, difficulty level, then develop the specification the same way you would do it for human development. And then we work with the AI engineers to develop scalable and modular processes that can generate all of this and also be modified according to feedback. And then you make this task operational and item guidelines so that you can create these items continuously. When I teach the automatic generation, I teach people about this concept of divide and conquer, especially when the items are very complex. Don't try to put everything into one request. Don't ask too much of GPT, because we found out that it's not working very well. So we divide and conquer. For example, if we have a passage followed by questions, we first develop the passage, then we fine-tune it multiple times as needed, and then we will develop the questions separately. So, and that's the principle that we use as well. This is an example of divide and conquer for very complex items, like the one I showed you before. You have an initial prompt, then you have multiple stances that you need to consider, then you have potential themes there, and then you have follow-ups for each theme. So what the AI does, so the engineering part is to develop the script for this structure. The assessment expert's job is to design the item itself and how it should work. And the AI job is to generate, especially number 4, but also under 3 and some of the 2 as well. So what will come into each structure is generated by AI. How the whole thing is put together is done by scripts by our engineers, and the assessment designers look and oversee the whole process. As you can see, this is not an amateur experience here when people talk about, here is AI and I ask it to solve this item or create me an item about, school engagement. Then after we generate hundreds, thousands of items of structures like that put together as items, we will have them reviewed. The items are reviewed for quality, but also for fairness and bias, I mentioned before. So here is how our item factory platform looks, where we have both machines, so automatic review, where we filter problematic content, flag overly technical terms, and so on, jargon of any type. And then we have item editors, review, label, and correct eventually the generated content. And then we have fairness and bias review, where we look for things that might advantage or disadvantage certain groups. And our editors and reviewers use this platform where they can together collaborate, they can track changes, they can edit, they can pass, show it if it's in progress, undecided, want to elevate it for discussion, and so on. Who are our items reviewers? So they have experience in TESOL or applied linguistics. They are trained to identify fairness and bias problems. The FAB reviewers have a diverse background, gender, country of origin, age, and again, they have experience and interest in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongings. We have metrics in place for humans as well, and for humans and content. So passage content labels, degree of content edits, selection, rejection of distractors, of keys, time to taken to fix the content, decision agreement. We of course train them. So there is a lot of effort put into training as well. Last but not least, we have the quality assurance in place. It's another system that monitors everything that's happening in the factory, both on the primarily this one is for content, but we also have metrics for human reviewers. How many items, how long, how well they agree with the others, and so on. On the content side, we have visualizations of different metrics at item levels or aggregates, content properties, item exposure, time in the pool refresh frequency, and all of that. I want to point out that on our website, we shared with the world the first set of responsible AI standards created by an assessment organization, to our knowledge. And we actually already reviewed that last year and updated it with feedback that we received. It's on our website, so feel free to take a look. The nice part about this is that we actually use it for making decisions, for guiding our decisions, and we include it in all of our documents that describe any proposed change. So no change is happening on the test unless it meets these standards. So to conclude this presentation, human-centered AI is at the core of digital-first assessment. But at the same time, digital-first assessments are conducive to automation and AI integration. And the item production definitely benefits from AI. Now, not all content needs to be AI generated, but the process is the same. You could have all a mix of AI generated and humans and still use the item factory. The generative AI is powerful and it needs human input and review. And we still need good human expertise and human management. They are really, really needed. This factory has been developed for our own needs, but the principles obviously are generalizable. With this, I want to thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Check our research page for the papers that I mentioned, including we have a paper on the item factory that is open to the public as well. And I want to acknowledge some of my colleagues who are on the test development team. So thank you.